This is the Running Channel podcast with me, Andy Baddeley, former two-time Olympian who fell out of love with running and then gradually has fallen back in love with running again and running much longer distances than I used to, because I used to only run 1,500 metres.
With me, Sarah Hartley, never considered myself a runner until kind of stumbled across it by accident at uni and have never really looked back. I like to still call myself an average runner, although there are a lot of people that will shout at me and say I'm better than that. But I just love it. I love getting better, and I'm trying to find my feet with my next challenge and goals as I've just got through my first kind of semi-big injury.
And me, Rick Kelsey, a recovering runner who had an operation called an osteotomy, which these two get really annoyed that I bang on so much about. I'm also a journalist and have released a song called The Last Man on Earth, which some reviews have described as feeling like you stood on a nail when you already had a headache. Welcome to the Running Channel podcast.
Wow, we'd all done quite a good job of introducing ourselves, and then because we haven't done that for a while to make sure everyone actually knows what they're listening to. But Rick's was the best summary of what you're listening to.
Do I stood on a nail whilst I was having a headache? That is such
I cut my arm on a nail.
Welcome to the new year, you two.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Happy
Very
New Year.
exciting.
Happy New Year.
Happy into the hundredths of
Yeah.
the podcast.
Yeah, feels good, doesn't it? What are we talking about today?
We're talking about how to train for a marathon because, Rick, this year, 2025, this is going to be your year. Is that right?
No, I have no intention of running a marathon at all, but thank you for the suggestion that you think that I could do it.
We absolutely do think that you could.
Yeah, and let's act as if you were to run a marathon.
Yes.
And perhaps we can go through some of your thoughts, feelings, fears, questions, conundrums. And
about how to train for it, if I was going to do it.
The hypothetical.
Right. Do it. Hypothetical.
If I was, how I would attack
marathon.
it.
How you would attack it.
Well, I suppose people are starting to think, aren't they? It's like the beginning of the year, you know, how do you go about it? But then I suppose people are starting to think about how they can improve at all distances. And if there's some things that they maybe weren't doing, Andy, that could improve their distances.
That's exactly right. Nice little setup there, Rick. Just to talk everyone through the format, if you're new to the Running Channel podcast, we have a little catch up on our running. Then we're going to dive into the bulk of what the episode's actually about. Sometimes we get there quicker than others. Then we're going to take on some news and answer your questions. But the main catch up I wanted to bring up here, Rick, is we were talking about this the other day, and you've got goals where you'd like to run faster at the park run, which is 5K.
Yes.
Remind me of your personal best.
22:38.
Excellent. And you do run you pepper around that time, or right around 23 minutes, quite regularly in your park run.
That's right, yeah.
In the hills of North London.
Very hilly North London.
But I hadn't realised, it shouldn't have surprised me, but I haven't realised that until the other day, that you just don't take any Running Channel advice yourself.
No, I do. I would say what you're about to reveal at this point
God, it's
is
so
very
dramatic.
common of many runners on a Saturday morning at 8:55 or 9:25 in Scotland.
So 8:55. Is this what time you
8
are?
o'clock in Queensland.
You're turning up to parkrun starting at 9 a.m. promptly at 8:55. And what's that not leaving you a lot of time to do?
Warm up.
So Rick does no running or jogging prior to starting the park run and running a PB.
And Andy suggested to me on New Year's Day that I could take a significant chunk off my time if I just did a warm up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you tested this theory yet?
No.
Are you going to? To give you some credit, obviously you've had all of this history of injuries, so you do some kind of movements and activations to get going. You don't just kind of bowl straight out of bed.
No,
go and run.
Yeah, no, I do. I do 3 different activations that we probably, me and you, us 3 have done on a run club together. I would say most people don't do many activations on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, and if you're just going to have fun on a Saturday morning to run around for 5K, that's fine. You don't need to warm up.
But if you're going all out,
but yeah, if you're
got your shoes,
and if you're saying to me like
your fast shoes on,
exactly, then doing a jog, and it doesn't have to be long or fast, but 5, 10, I would probably do 15 minutes.
What, full out?
No. Well, you
oh
only have
my God, it's not all full out.
You only he has to have one pace.
So a bit of sprinting in that warm up.
No.
Do you think?
Yes.
Well,
yeah. So ideally, like if I was to give you the holy grail of warm ups, or like I don't know, I would want to do at least 10 minutes of very easy jogging. It doesn't have to be fast at all, but I would try and speed up a little bit towards the end as my body got a bit warmer.
Okay.
Then I would do my drills or activations if I was going to do that. I know not everyone has time for this, but this is this ideal world. Then I would change my shoes because I'd have warmed up in a different pair of shoes to the ones I want to.
That's
run
far
fast
too
in.
keen.
Yeah, but you don't need to do that bit.
Literally. I barely remember to count all the children at the house.
Yes. Well, you don't have to because the help, your in-laws that you've flown over from Canada do that.
Well, yeah, well, I know that exactly. So 2 of them and 2 kids.
Yeah. Okay. And then after the changing shoes or after my drills, then I would do 2 or 4 strides. So those are
bring a second pair of shoes
at or faster than the
Strides.
pace I'm going to have to run the race at.
Even just, the best warm-ups for park runs or races that I've ever done is when it's really cold. When it's so cold that you can't bring yourself to stand around for 3 minutes.
So you get forced into just moving the whole time.
You just pop off for a little jog round the bin and back.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the best race
So
I've
glamorous.
ever.
Okay. So 5 to 10 minutes plus the activations and some
strides.
running strides faster than you're going to be running
But
at any
gradually,
point.
you don't just go boom and hit them faster
the
than race
5K.
pace. You accelerate into a sort of 100 meters. But
I'm going to try that this week.
yeah, I honestly think it'll make a huge difference. There's also a bit of science, unbelievably.
Oh, yeah?
I'm pretty sure it's called VO2 kinetics. That's how fast your body can get up to speed.
Like horsepower in a car or 0 to 60. No.
It's kind of like 0 to 60, but only if you were thinking about in terms of how quickly the engine warms up.
VO2 kinetics.
So if you were to just start your car cold on a winter's day, floor it, then like the engine and the coolant and everything that's moving around inside the engine hasn't had time to warm up properly. So that's a really inefficient way and could damage the engine.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing for your body. That's why we do a warm up. VO2 kinetics is specifically, if you've ever done an effort and if you to look at your heart rate trace afterwards, it takes a few minutes for your heart rate to come up to what it needs to be to power you at that speed.
Yeah.
So everything kind of lags behind.
Right.
The way that you can take in oxygen, all of the efficiencies of the various parts of your body.
Rick's glazed over.
It's slow. I'm going to be quick. It's slow to respond, your body. But if you were to do, I think you have to do it's an extended stride. So I used to do this when I was racing. So one of my 4 strides that I would do before going into to race would be more like 30 to 40 seconds at a hard effort, which is the last thing that you want to do because you think, well, that's going to tire me out before.
That's exactly what I'd be thinking.
Yeah. But you can actually do it up to half an hour before starting.
Oh,
and
right.
you still get the benefits of
See
this,
the
this
benefit of it.
improved VO2 kinetics. So
what
your
you
body's
need to do
ability
is
to get up to speed.
Turn up at 8:25 and then you will be running like sub 22.
Okay, I'm gonna give this a go. I would say that VO2 kinetics chat is something that me and you had before Sarah and I ran the Oxford Half Marathon.
Yeah.
And it was about being able to have that in your wheelhouse allows you to accelerate quicker. Because I think some of the 5K work that we'd done in the summer really helped like passing people in a half marathon and that ability to accelerate at points where you need to catch up on a time that you're going for.
Yeah, that's not VO2 kinetics. That's more just the ranges of paces that you've got at
range.
in your kind of like armory. So that if your fastest ever pace is the pace that you want to run a half marathon at, then it's just going to feel hard for the whole 13 miles.
Yeah.
But if you've trained at 5K pace and stuff like that, then your half marathon pace actually isn't that fast for the first few miles at least, and you should be well within yourself. So then, you can surge to pass people and do those things because you've got more in your wheelhouse, basically.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a half marathon today. We're talking about a marathon.
Nice.
Aren't we? And how might you do it? Because I suppose...
And how you're going to do it.
Well, also,
are you trying to send me to Cape Town?
Should we...
Oh, well, there was discussion about this because there's pretty good vineyards around Cape Town.
There are... Listen, let's not talk too much about whether I'm going to do it, but a lot of people at this moment are starting to
rooting
think...
for you.
Should we also are starting to think that Rick's going to run a marathon? No, I'm going to save you because the reason we have picked this topic for today is that if you are lucky enough to have got into the London Marathon, for example, or if you are running Manchester Marathon on the same day, or if you're doing any spring marathon for that matter.
Brighton, Paris, Boston, there's so many.
It's already time to start training, which might sound terrifying and you might be sat there with your hands over your ears thinking, I do not want to start training right now, but it's time to do something. Yeah, well, something is always better than nothing.
I like that phrase. It's time to start training, but I suppose when and how much training you do depend on what you're going for. But there's definitely a window, isn't there, that probably starts about this time of year, early January, and goes to what, middle of February?
End of April.
Yeah.
No, when you've got to start.
Oh, right. Well, no, I mean...
some people just don't start.
Yeah.
They start on the start line.
Ideal world, from a relatively good level of fitness, like you're running you're able to run regularly a little bit,
Yeah.
then you probably need at least 16 weeks to do yourself justice and to be safe training for a marathon.
And that's mainly so that you can build up the distances nice and slowly using the 10% rule like we've talked about before, but also give yourself time to have those deload weeks as well. So it's not just working backwards from the marathon in your calendar and going, right, okay, taper week, then the week before that, I'll do my longest run. Week before that, I'll do a bit shorter. Week before, you need to have kind of 4 to 5 week blocks where you are building up, then you're dropping off, and then you're building up again in order to condition yourself for what the marathon will feel like.
Yeah, and the very best marathoners who are trying to run as fast as possible, they still do that, even though they know they can cover the distance. But they would do a period of maybe 10K training where they're focusing on something different, and then they might start their 12 to 16 week marathon specific training work, because it's different. You're putting your body through different emphases, and like the stresses on the body are very different. And at the other end of the spectrum, if you're doing your first one, or you're not an experienced marathon, or you're not chasing a time, the longer that you give yourself to train for it, the more incremental the weekly gains required are. Whereas to go from nothing to a marathon in, say, 8 weeks, it's just would be a bad idea, because you just don't have time to sensibly progress. You might get away with it. Plenty of people do that sort of thing. But if you want to have the confidence, because a lot of this is about confidence. For me, I was worried I wasn't going to finish because it was further than I'd ever run before.
Is it possible? 8 weeks?
Anything's possible. We would just not advise it.
Yeah.
So I think it's very clearly on the record to say there's plenty of people that do run a marathon almost not training for it at all.
Yeah.
You can do it. You could do yourself quite a lot of damage. I'm not sure you'd enjoy it. And if you want to get the most out of the experience and enjoy race day and have the confidence going into it that you're going to have a good experience, you're going to celebrate on the day, you're going to, justify maybe the funds that you've either raised or had to spend to go and do it, and the friends and family that are going to be out on the course supporting you, then just, give yourself as long as you possibly can to get stuck into it.
The 10% rule is an interesting one because that's how I worked my half marathons last year. But obviously you've got to start somewhere. Got a poster on that by my front door. Start somewhere. So if you're starting
nice
at 10 kilometers and you're working kilometers, not miles.
Yeah.
So 10%, you're building up every week. You really need to iron it out. I mean, the way I did it was I put it into my diary. So my 10% became 11 the next week. And then it went maybe to 12.2, 12.5, maybe it went up a bit more than 10% to kind of out. And then you get to that level where you're tapering from a marathon. It's 3 to 4 weeks before, isn't it?
Yeah.
Before the event itself. But then most people don't get up to 26 miles. They probably get up to 21, 22. That's what I got up to.
It depends also massively on your pace, because the longer the run, the more tiring it is. So we've actually got a whole article on long runs on the Running Channel website, which is a really interesting read if you want to go and have a look at it, because it goes through, I think everyone used to have like 30K as the kind of the buzzword, which some people might run more. Jess, for example, when she was training for Berlin, I think her longest run was 34K. I've trained for marathon.
Only three quarters of the distance you get up to.
Yeah, because you don't need the thinking is that you don't want to go beyond the point of physical exertion where the recovery time that you need is more than the training benefit that you could get from doing other runs. So an important thing as well, if you are looking at targeting a kind of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hour marathon, you don't need to be going out for 6 hours as a training run.
In fact, you shouldn't.
You shouldn't, because it will take so long to recover. So actually, in the article that's on the website, we've recommended kind of 4 hours as a maximum.
It's fairly arbitrary, isn't it? But the coaching manuals and different coaching philosophies are somewhere around whichever is furthest for you, whether it's the time or the distance. So don't try to run 30 or 32K, 20 miles. If it is going to take you well over 4 hours, just run for 4 hours, because that's going to be really hard. And you, like Sarah said, it's decreasing returns and massively increasing risk of both illness and injury because of the stress you put your body through.
This is fascinating and stuff that I think most people hadn't thought about before. Like, I remember last year, it finally dawned on me that... Hi, Dawn.
Yes, we have a regular listener called Dawn, who may well be asleep by now.
Night, Dawn.
Night, Dawn. It finally dawned on me that the hour rule of fueling when you're out on a long run when you're training. So if you're going to be on your feet for longer than an hour during your training run, bring some fuel with you.
Yeah, but also an important thing on that, you don't just fuel once you've hit that hour. So if you're
continue. Yeah.
But
if you're staying out longer.
Before, so if you're out if I'm going out, for example, for a 10-mile run that will take me like an hour and a half, an hour and 25 minutes, my first bit of fuel I'm having after like 35, 40 minutes. I'm not waiting till an hour and then having the fuel.
Oh, just to weigh into that. Yeah. So when I was in marathon training, I needed to train my gut to be able to tolerate gels, because it's quite a lot of carbs that you need to keep your glycogen stores replenished throughout a marathon. And that can give you tummy troubles if you haven't practiced in training.
I see what you mean.
But when I was training for my half marathon, which I still haven't done because I got injured, but I would regularly run an hour and a half on a Sunday as my long run. And I didn't fuel for any of those deliberately, because I'd already done my gut training for various other things. I was confident that I'd be able to fuel in my final half marathon as I needed to.
Without taking anything on an hour and a half?
No, but I wouldn't take it in my training run, because actually I was deliberately glycogen depleting myself for the last, say, 20 minutes of that hour.
So why are we doing that?
Because, so this is where we fall into the grey area of my lack of science knowledge. But when I was competing, that was part of our scientific kind of approach, I think, which that you get quite big benefits to your metabolism and your body's way of producing energy and your fitness and the adaptation by sort of deliberately going not too far into it. So I think if I was running for longer than an hour and a half, I would need to fuel a bit, because otherwise I'd sort of put myself in a bit of trouble and I wouldn't recover quickly enough.
Because when we went to those nutrition talks, they said if you take one thing from it, like, you can go before, like Sarah does, you can go after, but if you just need some kind of basis and you've not done this before and you're heading into this training, think about that number an hour. If you're out on your feet for an hour, bring some fuel with you, because it gives everybody some kind of benchmark about what they need to do.
Yeah, mine was a conscious choice for myself, knowing what I knew from the past, that we get to about an hour and 10 minutes, and that's when I can physically feel glycogen depleted. And then I know that doing an extra 10 or 20 minutes from that point isn't going to put me in too much trouble recovery-wise, but I might get a little bit of benefit of the adaptation. So I wouldn't say that's for everybody.
That's actually another really good point, though, on why you train for so long with a marathon and for these longer distances, is because there are so many different things to practice. So number one is fuel. You don't have to take gels in a marathon if you don't want to. That is not the only kind of fueling solution. There are gels, there are chews, there are bars, there's also jelly babies. I took Haribo out on the recent Malaga marathon that we did back in December, because it was a pace that was a little bit more comfortable for me. I knew I could chew and run at the same time. I hadn't used gels in ages, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to get some Haribo Favoritos, and that worked for me. But do practice with different things that work for you. And that, if you have got a 16, 20-week training block, you've got time to take something out on one run and practice it.
And you can get some energy from drinks as well. So it doesn't always have to be, and you might need to have also water that's on the course to wash down a stickier gel or a chew or whatever the makeup of the thing is that you've got in your mouth. You might find that you need a bit of extra fluid. But yeah, some people I know people that carry soft flasks with them in their shorts that have pre-made energy drinks in them that give them extra carbs that way.
I think the thing as well with everything that you could possibly practice for a marathon is the end goal of every single thing is to make you feel good, happy, able to do it. So I think a lot of people get quite kind of understandably overwhelmed, because there's a whole wealth of information. Lots of it is contradictory. There's lots of different options that you could do with fueling, with what shoes to wear, with what kit to wear, with when to take your gels, when to tie your shoelaces, how to tie your shoelaces. Ultimately, if you've got a long training block, that is your time to practice what works
to figure it out
best for you. And as long as you're following kind of credible advice and it works for you, then you're golden.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. There's so many different ways. There's no one right way to fuel or train for a marathon. There's lots of different philosophies, and the most important thing for me, I think, is that you pick something that you trust, the source of truth for your training, and then try not to be distracted too much by what someone else is doing. So if you are training for the same marathon at the same time as someone you know in your club or locally to you, but you're following one training plan and they're following a different training plan, then you shouldn't really pick and choose between the two plans, because the way that the deload weeks are structured, the way that the training is structured to increase and so on, if you chop and change on the wrong week for you versus the wrong week for them, then all of a sudden you've totally changed the kind of emphasis of that week's training for you. So we didn't even say it, but the first thing I would suggest is that once you know how long it is to your marathon, is you need to plan your training out. So either you're doing that yourself and putting it into a spreadsheet, or you're choosing a coaching app, or you're downloading a PDF training plan. Whatever it is, though, try to stick to it as close as you can. And by that, I mean, don't be like, you don't have to be super rigid. You'll miss runs, stuff will happen. But like, don't pick and choose from a totally different plan that you've seen on the internet or social media. And you're like, I want to try that session. And you've got no idea the context in which that session
that's one
fits.
thing you should try and stick to, essentially.
Yeah, try and stick to the plan, but equally like take your time to choose it as well. The first thing I will do when I start a marathon training block is I will go right through to the longest run and I will see what I am doing that week in my calendar. Because if you've got a wedding, if you've got a...
Do you do anything other than weddings?
What other social events are there?
Well, I don't have any social events.
If you've got a wedding, if you've got a birthday party, if you've got a
catch up with your mates, you haven't
Friday
seen for
night
ages.
for Rick,
Exactly.
A haircut.
Spa day.
What spa day? Whatever
I
you're
love
into.
how you said haircut.
I was thinking what you might do.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, if you've got all of those things and you look at that kind of longest run, you know you've got to get out for 3-4 hours and it is the same weekend as your best mate's 30th where you know it's going to be somewhere in the hills, really hard to get out and run. Swap it around, look at a different option and get ahead. You have to be quite organised to run a marathon.
It would be my 43rd, not my 30th.
Oh, sorry, best mate. Yeah. Sorry, I was talking about a different one.
I read through quite a few training plans looking at this.
Right.
And there were 3 magic S's which kind of jumped to my mind, which I don't think jumped to most people's mind when they think about how they're going to plan their year for their training.
Oh, good. Excited for this bit of information. Here
Sleep,
comes the science, guys.
Stress and
Sex.
social.
Oh.
Social sex could be in social.
Andy, this is a family-friendly podcast.
It's not a rude word.
Sleep. Don't be terrified if you have awful sleep the night before your actual marathon, because most
Is
people
that
sleep
because you're doing what
awfully.
Andy said?
Because I'll be sharing a room with Andy, and that's just not gonna.
Steady on. But also sleep throughout your entire training plan. Like, sleep is not something to worry about the night before, but it's also your superpower
It's
for
your
the rest
superpower,
of the 16 weeks.
So try and get 7 hours sleep. Stress.
Or if you can.
I think it's basically a minimum. It's 7 hours. Stress. Trying to keep your stress levels low. You like a mindful technique? You like a breathing exercise?
I do like a breathing exercise. I also genuinely, I was going to say that you guys raise my stress levels, but you don't. Recording the podcast with you every week is my stress relief, because we can...
it's like golden syrup.
see people that you quite like. Golden
Sorry.
syrup. You got a story about golden syrup?
Golden syrup. I need to do a huge shout out to 2 lovely people from Canada who bought me some maple syrup.
No way.
Yeah.
Is this to replace your golden syrup in your porridge?
Yeah.
They're saying it's premium.
Had it on my porridge this
there
morning.
you go.
It was delightful.
Oh, nice.
So good.
And my final S, which is
Sorry.
social, which there are enormous amount of research has been done on this recently, but nothing before that. Amazing how much your social life can boost your endorphins and everything else, the natural power, and how your body works when it comes to your training. So if you have a happy, outgoing social life, you're communicating well, you're not lonely.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about loneliness a lot more, I suppose, now than we did 10 years ago. But if you're not, then that can fuel your body in a way that science never thought was possible.
Can I do a plug?
Go on.
Because of what you've just said. So not everyone has friends they want to talk to about running.
I'm just glad you did the second half of that sentence.
Where's this
Not everyone has friends.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Like Rick calls me a lot, so I don't know. But no,
He calls me too.
But it's not a competition. But no, the social aspect of sharing your running experience with other people, as well as I think probably what you're talking about is just having the ability to relax and have time away from running as well. But the whole reason that the Running Channel Club exists is to be surrounded by people that are pursuing the same goal. So this is a plug for the Running Channel Club. If anyone wants to check it out, you can go to club.therunningchannel.com. And in the club, you get put with people that are pursuing the same goal as you in a little micro community. So if that is running your first ever marathon or trying to run a faster marathon in this particular case, then you'll be surrounded by people that you can talk
Ticks the
endlessly.
third S, Andy.
Exactly. It's a social experience.
Yeah,
Plus you get extra episodes of our lovely podcast.
Yeah.
So plug over, check out club.therunningchannel.com.
I'd never really thought about the social aspect of it before. I mean, obviously, working as a journalist for years, I've done a lot of stories on loneliness, but I never thought about how that affects your health. And I think interesting, some of the science that has been worked on recently actually really connects the dots on loneliness and social ability and health. And the club's one of the ways that you can do it, but get out there, talk to people, and it will boost your endorphins and hopefully keep you fitter as well.
Yeah, happier runners. It's going to make everything more enjoyable. Like remember, you're setting out to do something, and it shouldn't just be this war of attrition. I know that Rick is sort of fairly anti-marathon. He's found his sweet spot at the half marathon right now. But if you're going to challenge yourself to do something, whatever it is in running, it should be fun as well. Like you see those signs in the marathons which are brilliant. It's like you paid to do this.
Yeah. I suppose there's a difference between what I'm talking about and like, you know, getting out there, socializing, enjoying yourself so you're a generally happier person.
Yes.
Compared to how you are actually on race day. Because Podcast Ben, when I was telling him about these studies that I was reading about for this podcast, he was like, the last thing I ever want to do is actually run with someone on a race because I just want to be in the race I'm in. So not on a race. Though me and you had a nice time running together last year. But I think in general, probably all three of us feel the same, that we like just being in our own headspace on a race.
Oh, I don't know.
No?
I think I like running with other people. I'm terrible. My own head is not a good place to be on race day.
But isn't it more exhausting because you feel like you feel the pressure to talk?
I know, but I kind of like that little bit of pressure. I think everyone's different. Personally, the best races that I ran last year were when I had someone to drag me through the first half of a race, which I find really scary. And then if they start to struggle in the second half, actually that's where I'm mentally strongest if we're on track. Where I completely lose the plot is if I've like talked myself out of it in the first half and then I haven't, even if I sprinted, couldn't possibly make up the time in the second half.
Yeah.
But should we finish off by maybe me and Andy giving our biggest tip for if someone is training for a marathon or starting to train right now?
Yes, I will go first, which is that it was unimaginable for me to be able to get to the marathon distance, even 16 weeks out. And I'd got to the point at that stage where I could happily run 3 times a week for 8, maybe 10K. And I just couldn't understand how I was possibly going to get to a longest run of 32K. And then after that, how I could get to running the marathon distance. But what really surprised me was that focusing and chunking it, focusing on 1 week at a time, which is like, oh, this week's long run is 12K. Okay. Next week's long run is whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, I was 8 weeks down the line. And my recovery runs during the week were 8 or 10K. And my long run at the weekend was so much further than I even thought. And I was fairly blasé about them at that point. I was like, yeah, okay, 18K, 20K, 25K, whatever it ended up being. All of a sudden, I was like, oh, but that's just a little bit more than last week, and that felt all right.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how quickly those percentages of fitness and so on add up to then you being quite comfortable doing something that 8 weeks ago you were like, oh my goodness, there's no chance. So I guess just hold on to that because it will come. That's my tip.
Mine would be not only like live in the moment for the marathon training block that you're doing, but plan after as well. I think it's so easy if when you do get to the kind of horrible back-to-back weeks where it's 26K and then 30K and then 32K is really exciting, but those are kind of the loneliest moments because you don't have the crowds, you don't get a medal at the end, your fuel might taste horrible on those runs because you're experimenting. Some of them will just be rubbish, and in that moment you need something to hold on to. And actually, if the race day is feeling a little bit daunting, then give yourself something that you're excited about afterwards, because a marathon block should be a block, and then you need to think about the block afterwards as well, and kind of look forward to whatever that might be. Yeah,
because when you finish, regardless of whether you're happy or sad of hitting your A goal or whatever it might be, you're going to feel a bit empty.
Yeah, there'll be a hole missing in your life because there'll be however many hours a week where you'll be free again. Yeah,
exactly. So book something in.
So Rick, there you go. There are all of your tips for your upcoming marathon.
2025 is going to be the year.
2025, Cape Town. Think of the wine after the race. And you're listening to the Running Channel podcast.
Let's do some news.
Let's do some news.
I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by this story. So after the UK Team GB did so well in athletics at the Paris Olympics, it's the biggest loser in funding, with nearly 1.75 million cut in pounds for the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics. UK Sport has denied that athletics is on the naughty step. It's an 8% cut despite the best Olympic performance since 1984.
And that's a cut over the 4-year window. I think,
over the 4-year window. LA. But that, I mean, 1.75 million, that's significant. That scale of
also,
cut.
athletics had, I think, for Team GB, 10 medals, the most successful Olympic Games since 1984.
Yeah.
So to have the funding cut when other sports have had a boost, I think cycling saw a boost.
Yeah.
It seems strange that there's been some sort of some defences that I don't fully understand from UK sport.
Yes,
But that
they'll
is a
still get
meaningful
20 million.
Plus, there's extra funding as well on top of that for the Paralympics. For
Correct. Extra for
para-athletics.
yeah. But the fear is it's going to impact on training camps and also funding for coaches. And
Well,
I
also
suppose
bear in mind with the inflation and so on that it's a real term, it's an actual cut of 1.7 million, but it's also that'll be a more substantial cut than that in real
Correct.
terms because of inflation.
yeah.
I think as well, it's always important to think about the athletes that are going to miss out because of this. Obviously, athletes who have got medals, they might have sponsorships.
They'll be making good money anyway.
They'll be making money, so they're not as in need of the funding. They might still need it to go out to the training camps and stuff. But it's the athletes who are potentially on the cusp of being able to leave full-time work to pursue a career in running. That's where the funding is so important. And if you don't have the backing, there might be loads of potential Olympic hopefuls that don't get there.
No, you're right.
Because they haven't got the time
thing
and
is,
space
though,
and money to do it.
UK sport, though, Sarah, they argue that these other sports need a boost because 44 out of 46 Olympic and Paralympic sports funded by UK sport are going to receive either more or the same money to help them. And the argument is that money's been pumped into athletics over the previous cycles.
Got it.
And that things need to equal out a little bit
Well,
more.
it's just hard though because it's like think of the generations. Like it's really lovely, but if you're a hopeful, you're 18 years old right now and you're seeing that, it doesn't give you that same boost that 18-year-olds had last year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's tough, but I know that UK athletics as well have struggled for cash in the last cycle, so they'll know that this is a hit. But then maybe there were various administrations over the past however many cycles that it is different now. And they're trying to change it and trying to make things profitable, like the Diamond League events and so on, which has meant that they haven't been able to invest in one of Michael. We should talk about this another time, but Michael Johnson's Grand Slam,
the Grand Slam track events.
that's something to talk about. But
There's one kind of, I suppose, one little thing that they've had to deal with in the last couple of cycles they've not had to deal with before. When they put new events, I mean, stuff comes and goes from the Olympics all the time, but in the last Olympics, we saw breakdancing, didn't we? And then in this Olympics, we've got cricket, baseball, softball, lacrosse, all taking part. So they have to pump in new money to new sports at the same time.
That's tricky. And that's an impossible thing. It's like they've only got a finite pot of money. So where does it go? But they've distributed it. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts anyone and like whether it directly impacts the best athletes or whether it impacts the sort of athletes on the cusp of making teams. But I guess we'll see how it plays out in the next 4 years.
Should we do some questions?
Let's.
Natasha from Chester. Good luck to Jess this year, especially on her 42 marathon goal. Yeah, I mean, we can't forget that. That's
we've
crazy.
talked about marathons and Jess talked about it on the podcast recently, how she's going to try and run 42 in 2025.
Incredible.
Madness. So Natasha has a goal to complete her first ever marathon training block in an injury-free spell. She's going to run the London Marathon in memory of her granddad. And her question is all about how to train with a friend, because her friends kindly offered to join her for support, but she hasn't got a marathon or any race booked at the end herself. And she asks, would you ever commit to train a full plan for 12 plus weeks, doing crazy distances with someone when you don't have a race/goal to compete at the end? Do you think you'd need to have that race at the end to celebrate and tick it all off? So she's talking about a friend there. So she's got it.
That is a good question.
Natasha's got a great friend now,
She's got a race, but not her friend hasn't. I mean, we've been talking about training with people, hanging out with people, going the distance with people in this episode. And if that person's not doing it, is that beneficial?
I mean, I think so. I think that's a sign of a great friend. I think it's an interesting point because not everyone, some people genuinely enjoy the training more than they do the race day.
Yeah.
So it might be, I don't know if her friend has run a marathon before or not, but it might just be that they want a goal, they want a bit of motivation. I would say, Natasha, your goal needs to be to try and get your friend to do the virtual London Marathon. And that would be incredible for you both to run it on the same day. Or they could do the backwards one and then you could do the forwards one.
Oh yes, there's a backwards one that starts at midnight, isn't it?
Yeah,
Or something like
and
that.
then finishes at the start
runs from the finish line of starts at the finish line, finishes at the start line.
Yeah.
That would be cool. But I think hats off to your friend. I think you should write back in to give a name check to them, because it's very it's very kind of selfless for them to do that. But that's the amazing thing about runners.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole load of people out there who don't get thanked for running with friends, for standing and coaching with a stopwatch in the hammering rain on a Tuesday night, for looking after youth athletes all over the world who like wouldn't otherwise have somewhere to go and train. Like, a lot of running is pretty selfless, and there's some amazing people out there.
Got some nice routes around Chester to train though, haven't they?
Rick, do you want me to come out and do the marathon training with you? Will that help? Look at his face. Look, that's such a nice thing, isn't it?
That's so kind, Sarah.
Yeah.
That's so kind.
Oh,
I would do
friend.
some of it with you as well, mate.
Last year when we did Malaga, you had to run past the people who were doing the whole marathon, had to run past the finish line to the half.
Yeah.
And I looked at the people who were going past, and I just thought that would be the end of me.
Soul destroying.
Yeah.
Well, we can pick a marathon for you where you're not allowed to stop at halfway.
Yeah.
Where halfway will be more inconvenient for you.
That's
to stop.
just how nice we are.
I just don't.
Boston Marathon, for example.
Oh,
stopping that's point to point.
inconvenient.
So if you stop
have
halfway,
have we not talked over the last 2 years about how when you found your happy place in life, embrace it?
You should keep searching just in case there is a happier place.
Right.
Another
I'm happy as
21
Larry.
kilometres away from where you
know many
think your
people-
happy
it's-
place is.
It's annoying, but I don't know many people happier than Rick.
I think though, honestly, I think you could sit Rick in a room with no windows, no phone, no other people, no sound, with a copy of The Spectator and a glass of wine, and he genuinely would be happy for at least 7 to 10 days.
Well, by the time I'd finished The Spectator.
I'll take
Yeah, sorry.
It's a
However
slow
long-
reader. Sorry, thorough reader.
Thorough reader.
Well, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
This is great.
Keep emailing in podcast@therunningchannel.com. We love hearing your questions,
Yep.
and we will see you in the next episode.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
email in, let us know which marathon Rick should do. Bye bye.
Ooh, yeah.
My God, these two.